Well, in a historic vote, the divisive assisted dying bill is a step closer to becoming legislation in England and Wales.
The ayes to the right, 314. The noes to the left, 291.
The ayes to the right, 314. The noes to the left, 291. The ayes have it, and look!
Well, Kim Leadbitter's bill passed the final Commons hurdle by just 23 votes.
And the Health Secretary has sounded the alarm, warning that there's no money to cover the estimated £500 million needed to implement the bill in its first decade.
Well, GBNews spoke to Rebecca Wilcox, Dame Esther Ranson's daughter, earlier on.
What I have listened to are the stories of the most courageous families you can possibly imagine, who have told me of the endless trauma and tragedy surrounding the dying of their loved one that could not be eased by palliative care. I understand as well that assisted dying can go hand in hand with palliative care. They are not mutually exclusive. It is just another tool in the med bag of a consultant palliative care doctor. And it's one that so many doctors agree with. There are letters being sent to MPs from 50 of the most senior palliative care consultants saying this is something that we need, this is something that we can use within our brilliant palliative care system.
Well, joining us now is the Conservative MP for Reigate, Rebecca Paul. Rebecca, thank you for joining us this morning. It was a passionate debate in Parliament yesterday, but lots of concern that MPs don't really know what the outcome of this bill could be in terms of whether or not it will be extended beyond the supposed safeguards, whether or not vulnerable people will be coerced into taking their own lives. Do you think MPs properly understood what they were voting for yesterday?
Thank you so much for inviting me on today. So sadly, I don't think a lot of the MPs had taken the time to properly read the bill. So I've said many times that I'm not against the principle of assisted dying, but I'm opposed to the bill. I sat on Bill Committee for several months and went line by line, word by word, and there just aren't adequate safeguards. And it's very clear that there will, of course, be some people that benefit from assisted dying, but there's a much, much larger group of very vulnerable people that stand to lose out from this and be harmed.
Rebecca, you were part of that committee stage, of course, as you've just referenced, going line by line through the bill. Did you feel as though the witnesses were balanced in ensuring that both sides were understood on this debate?
So from my perspective, no, I didn't feel like they were balanced. However, having said that, in some ways, it actually shone a light on the full impact of assisted dying. So, for example, we had some doctors from other territories that were very pro-assisted dying, and actually some of the language they used around safeguards being a barrier to access, that kind of stuff actually hit quite hard. So I don't think it necessarily was detrimental to those of us that were opposed to the bill. It really did shine a light on what happens when you introduce such a monumental change into how you deliver healthcare and how you look after the elderly and the infirm and the unwell in our communities.
Now, you and many other MPs tried to introduce amendments in that committee stage to improve the safeguards in the bill, for example, to prevent people suffering from anorexia being eligible for assisted suicide, or to prevent doctors actually raising the possibility of assisted suicide with their patients. Now, those were all rejected by Kim Leadbitter. Why do you think she and her supporters did reject these very sensible amendments?
I'm fascinated by the strategy. I really can't understand why they didn't accept them. So both the things you've raised, it's very clear the amendments we put forward, they weren't wrecking amendments. They were genuine amendments that would improve the safety of the bill. So, for example, as you referred to, a doctor should not raise it first with a patient. That is a basic safeguard. And for some reason, they rejected it, and I have absolutely no idea why. And I'm really hoping when it goes through the Lords that debate will be had again, and that important safeguard can be put into the final bill.
Rebecca, is this Parliament at its best? I've heard this phrase repeated a lot since the debate for assisted dying started, and it certainly was very loud yesterday as the vote was coming in. Mostly people, funnily enough, who supported the bill were saying that. But do you recognise that characterisation of Parliament?
So it's difficult for me to judge because I was only elected last year. So this is my first experience of Parliament, to be honest with you. And wow, what an experience to be chucked in the deep end with assisted dying and abortion all in my first year. It didn't feel like, if I think about my career, I'm from a professional background. I was a chartered accountant for 20 years. Does this feel like the best way to make decisions? No, I feel like facts and evidence were pushed aside. I think it became quite tribal and ideological. And, people wanted to win rather than actually listening to the very real issues. And as I've always said, there became this battle about suggesting that those of us against it were, against it for religious purposes. Well, there's lots of us. I'm an atheist. That we literally came at it from we must protect the vulnerable. And I really feel like I wasn't heard, to be honest with you, by the other side.
Now, Rebecca, you mentioned that other vote this week, the vote to decriminalise abortion to birth. And what's so interesting about that vote, the assisted suicide vote, also the debate around the grooming gangs inquiry in Parliament, is that MPs are in such a different place to the mood of the general public. Just 1% of the general public agree with that abortion vote, and yet over 70% of MPs voted for it. Do you think the divide between the worldview, if you like, of Parliament and the public is growing ever wider?
It does feel like that. And I think, unfortunately, this is the reality of a Labour supermajority. And it would be the same with any colour of government. You don't want such a supermajority in place. And we are now seeing more extreme laws come through as a result of that. And I have to say, the abortion vote was particularly, I was absolutely devastated by it. And it wasn't even close. If you look at the numbers of votes, we were completely outnumbered. It went through with ease. And again, very good arguments would be made as to why decriminalisation was the wrong solution to the issue of increased prosecutions, but no one was listening. And there wasn't time to debate it properly. I think there was 40 minutes of backbench debates.
Yeah, not sufficient at all. Well, Rebecca Paul, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Rebecca Paul, MP.
Right, let's talk to the daughter of Esther Ranson. You'll have known that Esther has campaigned for this for a long time, been in front of all the papers as well with this. Her daughter, Rebecca Wilcox, joins us now. It's very good to see you. We appreciate your time. Can I ask you, let's sort of crack on with the controversies around this, because obviously you're pleased this has gone through to this point. But how much do you understand the concerns that are still there about this legislation as it currently stands?
What I understand is what I've witnessed, and I have been really privileged to be a part of this campaign for the last few months, probably just years now, ever since Mum surprised us all by announcing that she would buzz off to Switzerland if the pain and her dying became insufferable. What I have listened to are the stories of the most courageous families you can possibly imagine, who have told me of the endless trauma and tragedy surrounding the dying of their loved one that could not be eased by palliative care. I understand as well that assisted dying can go hand in hand with palliative care. They are not mutually exclusive. It is just another tool in the med bag of a consultant palliative care doctor. And it's one that so many doctors agree with. There are letters being sent to MPs from 50 of the most senior palliative care consultants saying this is something that we need, this is something that we can use within our brilliant palliative care system, which of course is postcode patchy. And that is another thing, the report that came out last year in February, that was 14 months of strong investigation that said, actually, in the countries that have access to assisted dying, palliative care does not get worse. And in some cases, it really does improve. So that's what I'm hoping for with this country, because, of course, that is what my mum is going to be reliant upon. There is a 4-year backstop for this. It could take up to 4 years. It is not a target. It is a threshold. It could come in sooner. But as anyone who is facing a terminal diagnosis or has a loved one who is facing a terminal diagnosis knows, it is impossible to put a trajectory on these things and really say how soon it would be. And in terms of the vulnerable, in terms of those people that are out there feeling very scared about this law coming in, they are not eligible for this. There are more protections in this law than exist now. There are safeguards and legal implications that protect against coercion. You have to be terminally ill. You have to be dying. You have to be an adult. But being differently abled or disabled does not make you eligible for this. And there are social workers, psychiatrists, medical professionals, and legal professionals who will now be able to put a stop to any coercion that can currently happen.
How is your mother now, and what was her reaction? There's a big picture of you in today's papers. You immediately got on the phone to her. What was her reaction yesterday?
I don't know whether it's allowed to say that obviously we know each other, Anne, and I remember you from many wonderful family parties when life was a bit happier and my gorgeous dad was still around and Mum was healthy. And so she would say to you, Anne, big hug. She is coping. She is on a new chemo regimen. She is astonishingly strong. I don't know how she does this. She has revealed today, so I think I'm allowed to, that it's not just one type of cancer, it's several different types. So as she says, it's a bit overkill, it's a bit much, but she's brilliant. She's going to be 85 tomorrow, and she looks incredible, and her grandchildren will be crawling all over her, and we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful day. And the fact that she has taken part in this campaign and used these months, these few precious time to do this is just an example of how wonderful I think she is. I am so proud of her, because really anybody else with a terminal diagnosis, we should just all be taking time to reflect and be with our family and relax, perhaps. I think she's earned that. But she saw a need and she heard from so many people. And as you know, when you hear from somebody who has no voice, who has no agency, you cannot help but act if you have agency of your own, if you have a voice of your own. But what Mum said to all the MPs who said you shouldn't use a celebrity platform to campaign on policy is, she has always spoken as somebody that has a terminal diagnosis, and she has spoken as somebody that is a voter, that is a constituent. She has not spoken as a celebrity. She has always used her voice to speak for the voiceless. And who is more voiceless than somebody that has a terminal diagnosis, that is dying, or that has died a horrible, painful death?
I mean, the issue with this, and we've had a few people on the show over the last few days who would say, look, from a personal point of view, I would support this. I mean, I've always felt that as someone, if I wanted to make that decision, yes, I'd be in a position to make that decision and know what I was doing and not feel pressured by family and loved ones. And obviously your mum's in the same position. But the concern is here, and a lot of people have said, even though I support the concept of assisted dying, I'm not confident in this legislation. I'm not confident, despite what you said, that there are enough safeguards in this in place for all of this, and the watering down of a High Court judge being involved in issues like that. So are we rushing this through, in a sense, when perhaps, although for people like your mum, they'd want it to happen more quickly, but perhaps it's such a fundamental change in our law that actually we really need to take our time with this?
Do you know that the first assisted dying debate happened in the 1930s? I mean, I don't know about you, but I wasn't around then, and so that's a long time to be discussing this. This bill has come into fruition from countless stages, decade after decade after decade. I think that's a really long time to discuss this. It has had over 90 hours of debate in the chamber, much more than many bills will get. And yes, it is a private member's bill, which some people may say, this is an odd way to make policy. It's not. It's happened before. Anti-abortion, the abolition of homosexuality as a crime. These things came through private members' bills. This is how democracy works. It is wonderful to see it, to hear it. I knew so little about this process before I became part of this campaign. I have been so overawed and impressed by the process and the speeches that were given, the debate, the respect that was in that room, the cleverness, the articulate speeches that were given by MPs on both sides of the debate. And it's a free debate as well, which means you don't have to vote according to your party's directive. So it was a really personal debate with many stories. I wanted to point out David Burton Sampson, a Labour MP, who himself is a devout Christian, who himself doesn't agree with assisted dying for himself because of his Christian faith and his fears over dying. But he listened to his constituents, he listened to the stories, and he changed his mind and he voted in favour of it. And as he said, there are safeguards in place. He's seen that there is an improvement, that it is not watered down because there isn't a High Court judge. It has been improved by this multidisciplinary panel. It is a gold star of assisted dying laws. In fact, in the case of it having so many safeguards within it, it's actually incredibly difficult to access it. And it brings in criminal prosecutions of up to life imprisonment for anybody that has been found guilty of coercion. That doesn't exist now. It's a brilliantly safe law that has been talked about for so long. It has not been rushed through. And what I would say to anybody that is worried about this, that doesn't think there are enough safeguards, what would your assisted dying bill look like? If you do agree with assisted dying in principle, why is this law not right for you? Tell us how it could be improved. There's no such thing as a perfect law. We all know that. But this is pretty close.
My goodness, you are your mother's daughter, aren't you? Please give her our absolute love, especially from me. Thank you so much, Rebecca Wilcox.